This video is the fourth in a series honoring the memory of my late wife, Esther Kauffmann Forsen, who died on January 16, 2013. The first video in this series focuses on her early childhood years growing up in what was then Palestine and is now Israel. The second video focuses on the time spanning her teenage years and later growing up to be a beautiful young woman. The third video focuses on the family values Esther inherited from her parents. This video steps back in time to illuminate Esther's family achievements and traces the career of Esther's father, Richard Kauffmann, a pioneering architect and town planner. Before and during our marriage, over 51 years ago, I learned much from Esther about the young country of Israel, its ideals, and the role her family had in its creation. We also inherited a large collection of photographs in varying condition, a select few of which form the basis of this video. Because Esther's father took most of the photographs, he rarely shows up in one. As you can see from this highly restored photograph, there were four in the family: Esther's mother Bath-Sheva, her father Richard, her sister Ruth, and of course we can't overlook the dog Patz. We look in more detail on the professional lives of her parents, as well as their personal lives. Richard Kauffmann and his firm alone was responsible for the planning of nearly all of the early Jewish agricultural settlements in the British Mandate of Palestine, now the State of Israel. He stressed being in harmony with the landscape, the environmental factors such as the predominant winds, and the social and cultural needs of the people. He also planned many of the garden suburbs based on the emerging trends in European town planning, which are still the more desirable residential locations today. He also was responsible for several regional plans, including one for the entire Haifa-Acre Bay Area development, made in 1925 through 1926. Kauffmann was the architect of many fine houses, including the one now used by the Prime Minister of Israel, as well as industrial and commercial buildings. He developed his own architectural style after what he learned from Mies van der Rohe, an early modernist, stressing simplicity in design, eschewing so-called Oriental frills. Although Kauffmann's work is often mistakenly classified as Bauhaus style, it actually predated it. In the days of no electric air conditioning, he devised ways to use natural convection with elevated double roofs and large overhanging structures of reinforced concrete to maintain cooler interiors. Not only was he a structural engineer, he was also an artist, a talent that allowed him to portray to citizens what their new town would look like and to help convince them of its merits. He was a man of many talents. Altogether, Richard Kauffmann and his team was responsible for planning over 460 projects, nearly half of which came to fruition. All of his plans, drawings, and private papers are now kept safe in the Central Zionist Archives in Jerusalem, for which Esther had custodial authority and for which I now have that responsibility. This old sepia photograph was taken of Richard Kauffmann's father, and someone you might just recognize. His father had moved his family from the Alsace-Lorraine area to Frankfurt and established a printing company there. The following is an excerpt from an article published in a 1983 Jerusalem Post magazine article titled "The Grand Designs of Richard Kauffmann," written by Abraham Rabinovich. Born in Frankfurt in 1887 to an assimilated family, his father had renounced his strict orthodoxy after another son had died. Kauffmann hoped to be an artist. A sketch of the town of Dachau he made before World War I hangs in his widow's apartment in a Jerusalem home for the aged. Esther's mother was alive at the time this article was written. Esther brought the painting back with her from a trip to Israel. It depicts some of the quaint architecture of what was then an artist colony. It is a shame that the city now has a different reputation. Continuing with the quote. His father, however, insisted that he learn a profession, and Richard studied architecture and the new profession of town planning in Munich. He began his career in Essen, designing workers' houses for the Krupp Works under one of the most esteemed planners of the time, Professor George Metzendorf, who wanted to take the talented young man on as a partner. However, a painful love affair led Kauffmann to quit Essen in 1913 and try to forget his disappointment in travel. In Holland, he met Mies van der Rohe and others engaged in the search for a modern architecture. If you look closely at the photograph, you'll see that the person standing next to Kauffmann's father is none other than Albert Einstein. I don't think they were discussing his theory of relativity, however. Throughout the remainder of this video, I shall be using material from a biography of Richard Kauffmann that was written in 1978 by Lottie Kahn, an early assistant, and dedicated to his wife, Bath-Sheva Kauffmann. Originally written in German, we had it professionally translated into English. Here you see the portrait of Kauffmann as a young man of 26 that was taken in 1913 by the photographer Hess. Kauffmann opened his own office in Frankfurt, but was then called to active military duty in 1914. He fought on both fronts, was wounded from shrapnel, and received the Iron Cross Medal for valor in saving the lives of his fellow soldiers. In 1917, he was no longer in the front lines and was stationed in Kowel, a town in Volhynia, Russia, where there was a large Jewish community who welcomed Jewish soldiers. During his stay in Kowel, Kauffmann had a chance to participate in a Russian contest to build a zoning map for the garden city Prigorod. near Kharkov. He won the first prize. After the war, Kauffmann competed in a field of 50 aspiring architects for the position of government town planner in Christiania, now Oslo, Norway, and won that position. He stayed in Norway until invited by Arthur Rupin in 1920 to Palestine to come and head the physical planning of the country. Many wondered why he would give up a prestigious position and go to an uncertain future. But his Zionism led him to the challenge of building a new country from the ground up. Here you see Esther's mother when she was Bath-Sheva Gelb. The photograph was taken in Vienna after moving there from Bratislava in what was then Czechoslovakia, now Slovakia. Unfortunately, we have little information about her parents or what her family life was like in Bratislava, a large city on the Danube River, about 55 kilometers from Vienna. She appears deceptively demure in this photograph because she, like her eventual husband, was an ardent Zionist, determined to make her mark in Eretz Israel. That land, at the time, was a British mandate that had been partitioned into Palestine on the west side of the Jordan River and Transjordan on the east side. It was her intention to go there and become a teacher. We have a similar picture of her taken about the same time with the inscription, "So you will remember me how I was." We also have another photograph of her in a classroom full of her young students seated around a large table. Moshe Dayan, one of Israel's greatest military leaders, was once in her first grade class. Bath-Sheva was the rock in the family. She was the person the other family members could always come back to, including her husband. Esther and Ruthie could always find comfort with their mother if they were having difficulties, sometimes with each other. She could always resolve issues in a way that left both children feeling better. But later, when the children had grown up, she was always there to help. She sometimes helped with bringing up her granddaughter. While Richard Kauffmann was generous with their wealth, what little they had, Bath-Sheva was generous in her caring. They say behind every successful man there is present a strong and supportive woman. Bath-Sheva Kauffmann was surely that kind of woman. Arthur Rupin joined the World Zionist Organization in 1905. In 1907, he was sent to study the condition of the Yishuv, the Jewish community in Palestine, then in the Ottoman Empire, and to investigate the possibilities for development of agriculture and industry. He reported on what he saw, which was distressing, and gave recommendations for improving the situation. In 1908, Rupin came to live in Palestine and opened the Eretz Yisrael office of the Zionist organization in Jaffa, with the aim of directing the settlement activities of the Zionist movement. His work made practical Zionism possible and shaped the direction of the second Aliyah, the last wave of Jewish immigration to Palestine before World War I. Rupin became an important Zionist land agent. He helped to get a loan for Ahuzat Bayit, later Tel Aviv, and acquired land on the Carmel, in Afula, in the Jezreel Valley, in the Galilee, and in Jerusalem. Rupin was instrumental in shaping the nature of Jewish settlement in Palestine and in changing the paradigm of settlement from those of a plantation owner and poor laborers to the collective and cooperative kibbutzim and moshavim that became the backbone of the state in the making. He catalyzed the commune at Segera and helped building the first kibbutz, Tiganya, as well as helping to support and organize Kinneret, Merhavia, and other settlements. Rupin invited Esther's father to come to Palestine from Norway to lead the physical construction of the Jewish settlements. Over the years, the Rupins and the Kauffmanns became close friends. On a visit to Esther's mother, following the death of her husband, Hannah Rupin told her that one of the smartest things her husband ever did was to convince Richard Kauffmann to come to Palestine. A second important figure in Zionism and the growth of Jewish settlements in Eretz Israel is Menachem Yusishkin. Here you see Yusishkin mounted on the mule in a photograph taken by Richard Kauffmann, Esther's father. Yusishkin held strong beliefs regarding what path Zionism should take and was very forceful in voicing them. He emigrated from Russia to Palestine in 1919. And soon became the head of the Zionist Commission, and later became the president of the Jewish National Fund, serving in that position from 1922 until his death in 1941. The Jewish National Fund became the main instrument for redeeming and reclaiming the soil of the ancient homeland on behalf of the Jewish people. During much of that time, Yusishkin lived in Merhavia in a grand house designed by Esther's father that was within eyesight of the Kauffmann residence. Yusishkin was responsible for obtaining significant portions of the funds that were used to purchase large tracts of land to be used for Jewish settlements. Yusishkin published the pamphlet Our Program, in which he wrote of farms and settlements in which Jewish workers would cultivate the land acquired by the Jewish National Fund, quote, with their own hands, without help from hired laborers, unquote. This was the earliest form of the idea of the moshav odim, a workers' cooperative settlement where the family was the basic unit of production and owned its own farm. Richard Kauffmann was the primary planner for this type of agricultural settlement and designed the very first moshav, Nahalal. Yusishkin was born in 1863 in Dubrovna, Russia. While still in Russia, Yusishkin was a staunch advocate of the creation of a homeland for the Jews in Palestine, and he had opposed the idea that was put forth by Chaim Weizmann, another Jewish leader, of settling in Uganda. A fervent advocate of expanding Jewish land ownership as a tool for strengthening Zionism's political claims, he was equally passionate about reviving Hebrew as a spoken language and expanding educational institutions in Palestine. He was instrumental in organizing the Hebrew school network in Palestine and in establishing the settlement Kiryat Anavim near Jerusalem. He was also instrumental in founding the Hebrew University that later became the Technion. What you are looking at right now is a photograph of the actual drawing of the plan for Nahalal, the first moshav ha'ovdim, or workers' moshav, in Palestine, designed by Esther's father, Richard Kauffmann. Nahalal is in the Jezreel Valley, in what is now the northern part of Israel, about 30 kilometers southeast of Haifa. Its current population is about 900 persons. It is situated on a low, wide hill and incorporates an area of about 8,500 dunams. A dunam was a unit of land area used in the Ottoman Empire and represented the amount of land that could be plowed in a day. It is now defined as exactly 1,000 square meters. This agricultural settlement was formally established on September 11, 1921, only a year after Kauffmann's arrival in Eretz, Israel. The moshav was designed in the spirit of its founders, the idea of equivalence and share, a sort of round table. All that sit around it are equal. The village layout became the pattern for many of the moshavim established before 1948, when Israel became a state. For example, Kfar Yehoshua has a nearly identical layout and was also planned by Kauffmann. The basic pattern can also be found in faraway places like Mexicaltlán, Mexico, Palma Nova, Italy, Hamina, Finland, and Karlsruhe, Germany. In 1984, the Israel Postal Service issued a stamp with a very colorful rendition of Nahalal. The design of Nahalal was not just geometric for its own sake. There were geographic, cultural, and safety concerns involved. Note that the layout of the streets and buildings and agricultural lots was done on top of a topographic map of the area. The design is based on concentric circles, with the innermost circle around the center of the moshav, where in the outer ring there are farms next to each other. In the front of each farm stands the family house. Behind it are all of the farm buildings and agricultural lands. In Nahalal, there were 75 agricultural farms, each on its own lot. On a further 5 lots at the entrance to the moshav was soon built the agriculture school for girls, who were to become part of the agricultural labor force. In the center of Nahalal lay the public facilities and educational centers and other public buildings, such as administrative and cultural offices, cooperative shops, and warehouses. Kauffmann planned not only for economic needs, but also social needs, and thus included buildings for meetings and performing arts in his basic design. These central buildings were equally accessed by all members by virtue of the circular layout and were cooperatively owned and managed by them. Right in the center, the tallest building was the water tower. You can see from this aerial photograph of Nahalal, taken several years after its founding, that indeed the buildings and land are nearly exactly as planned, with individual family farms radiating outward from the center that housed buildings whose functions supported all the families. The founders of Nahalal had been given numerous options to settle in Israel by the Jewish National Fund. In the end, they chose to settle in the Jezreel Valley. It turned out that the area had many springs and streams with no natural drainage. The small rivulets created marshes which attracted Anopheles mosquitoes that spread malaria. Heeding the warnings of the experts among them, like Dr. Hillel Yaffe, an expert on the war against malaria, they settled on a nearby hill near the Arab village of Makhlul. The drainage and preparation of the land was tedious manual labor done by the settlers themselves and Jewish workers who worked with them, mainly members of the third Aliyah that came after World War I. The founders were mostly young people who came to Eretz Israel with ideas and a passion to settle the territory and build there the image of the, quote, new, unquote, Jew that holds and cherishes his land. Many of the early settlers lived in a kibbutz, the first of which was Degania. Life in kibbutzim was more communal, where even family raising was shared with separate sleeping quarters for the children. The notion of individual family claims to property did not apply. After they had worked for about 10 years in villages, agricultural farms, in groups and corporations gaining experience, they aspired to create a new type of settlement, both social and agricultural. They chose to create the first workers' moshav, whose ideology included social justice, a connection to the land, and life based on work on a family farm. Eliezer, a founder of the moshav, wrote about the idea in his, quote, foundation for a workers' moshav, unquote. The central principles of the moshav were held for decades. These principles and the community structure established in Nahalal differentiated the moshav from the historic village. A. National land. Land given to settlers on lease in order to prevent trade in land. B. Independent work, that the settler would work on his farm, helped by his family without paid work. C. Mutual assistance. Individual assistance when necessary by physical work or financial assistance. D. Communal buying and selling enabled farmers to direct most of their energies to work on their farms, preventing the need to market the produce or buy the necessary farm needs, also to prevent competition on prices of products between the members. E. Hebrew language. You can see how this fits in with the ideas of Rubin and Ushishkin. All of this factored into the planning of the moshavim by Richard Kauffmann. When searching for material on Nahalal, I found this 2-page spread from the July 5, 1937 issue of Life magazine about Jews farming in Palestine, and I just had to share it with you. The popular conception in the United States and elsewhere was that Jewish people were urban-oriented, and that was largely true. But as I've stressed in the narrative for the previous photos, there are many Jews who were pioneers and willing to take the risk for a new kind of land-oriented living. The Life article retraces the political history before 1937 and talks about the potential for Arab-Jew conflict that was predicted to happen as a result of the forthcoming British Commission on Palestine report. And I quote, "The Arab-Jew vendetta is racially absurd because both are Semitic. The Arab's dislike is largely that of the country boy for his cousin who has just come home after 1,500 years in the city. The Jews have already raised the standard of living of Palestine Arabs, reduced disease, built up a humming export business, constructed dams, roads, power works, and irrigation ditches, and reforested the desert. The Arab leaders, covertly opposed to British rule, are backed by Italy and propose to win freedom first, then deal with the Jews. But outwardly, they say they hate only the Jews, love the British, deplore the way Jews let British soldiers fight their battle. The only hope for a Palestine peace is a peace negotiated between Arabs and Jews, not imposed by outsiders. Neither Jews nor Arabs have yet made the smallest movement toward such negotiations." Unquote. The text describing the photos in the magazine are even more pointed. For example, these handsome, energetic Jews work from sunrise to sunset in Palestine's broiling sun. Both the hours and the girls' shorts shock lazy tropic-wise Arabs. The Jews' unwise undress in the sun is having a bad physical and nervous effect on the colonists as a whole. The text on the right, describing Nahalal, reads as follows: Jews made a garden of what was once the famed, swampy, malaria-plagued spot of the valley of Esdraelon, west of the Jordan. They just drained the swamps, sprayed the pools with kerosene to kill mosquito larvae. Result? Nahalal, a cooperative village with fertile farms fanning out from it. The girl on the opposite page is a student at Nahalal's farm school for girls, run by the Women's International Zionist Organization. Notice the high road through the valley of Esdraelon leading to the interior and the Jordan. You can see from the aerial photo of Nahalal that in 1937 it was a thriving agricultural community. Notice the orchards of neatly planted trees on many of the farms. On the next and last set of photographs, you will see Nahalal as it exists today. This photo shows what Nahalal looked like when photographed from a satellite in 2010. The photograph was obtained using the Google Earth program. The first thing that strikes me is that the essential design of Nahalal has not changed. The circular roads and radial layout of the properties are still the same. What has changed is that the farms have now obtained larger structures. According to Nahalal's own internet website, these are agricultural factories, for example, an animal food factory and a center for farmers who make and sell their products to members of the moshav and to the rest of the area. Note also that many of the original lots have been extended beyond the original circumference, and that nearly all of the land between Nahalal and the surrounding communities has been put into agriculture. During the first decades of the existence of the moshav, the family farm was a, quote, mixed farm, unquote, that was based on a variety of agricultural industries. Over the years, the nature of agriculture has changed. The farms have become specialized farms, one main agricultural field and several secondary branches. Farms in Nahalal are mostly based on either dairy, beef cattle, sheep, and poultry. In the last decade, the growth of citrus fruits figure prominently as well as a variety of crops. In recent years, there has been a decline in the ability of agriculture to be a sole source of income for the family farm. Many farmers have found alternative livelihoods or occupations in various fields in order to supplement the family's income. Also, according to Nahalal's website, the original agriculture school for girls is now the site of the middle and high schools. In addition, there is a post office, a clinic, a grocery shop, as well as the agricultural supply shop and other standard resources supporting basic needs for Nahalal and the surrounding villages. Other public facilities include a club for the elderly, youth club, a synagogue, a swimming pool, a library, and archives. Notable also is the list of well-known persons who have lived in Nahalal. These include Asi Dayan, film director, actor, screenwriter, and producer; Moshe Dayan, minister of defense and war hero; Shmuel Dayan, one of the founders of Nahalal, a member of the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, and the father of Moshe Dayan; Yael Dayan, author, former member of the Knesset, former deputy mayor of Tel Aviv, and daughter of Moshe Dayan; Yehonatan Geffen, musician, poet, and playwright; Amos Hedar, also a member of the Knesset; Aryeh Nehemkin, minister of agriculture; Moshe Peled, also a member of the Knesset; and Amir Prueli, internationally known computer scientist and professor at the Weizmann Institute; Meir Shalev, TV personality and author of fiction, including About My Russian Grandmother and Her American Vacuum Cleaner; Hannah Sens, poet and subject of the movie Hannah's War; and finally, Ilan Ramon, Israel's first and only astronaut, who perished with the other crew members in the Columbia disaster, is buried in the Nahalal cemetery. Though not born in Nahalal, he lived and married there. This is a photo of his burial site in the Nahalal cemetery. In the mid-1980s, Nahalal and other communities went through an economic and social crisis. As a result, some of the original principles of the moshav have been abandoned. The mutual and shared financial responsibility has been modernized by each member now working directly with the bank. Management is now in the hands of an elected governing council. These changes reflect the modernization of the entire country of Israel. It is, however, a testament to the foresight and planning of Esther's father, Richard Kauffmann, that Nahalal remains a viable, thriving community.